going on, everybody? Welcome back. It's One-on-One, Kristian Harloff. I've been having some fun shows, man. Some really fun shows here since we brought this thing back. And we've had on to Pittman Smith was last week. Kevin Smith, Steve Byrne. And as you guys know, I've been really going back to my roots, stand-up comedy. And I've been talking to you guys about these signs of kind of pointing and how it just kind of things like line up. So recently, as I told you, I took the whole day off from work, didn't tell anybody. My wife thought I was working, and I just took myself in the garage and I smoked a couple bowls and I was watching just old sets and knowing that I was going to start doing shit again. And what happened then? I hear from Steve Byrne. He's doing this movie about stand-up comedy, and then the audience starts telling me, "Hey, have you been watching the documentary on the Comedy Store? Have you been watching the documentary?" And at the time, I hadn't, and then I dove into it. And not only am I obsessed with it, not only it was my home. It was my home for so long, and it was the place that I really cut my teeth and learn how to maneuver around crowds and all this stuff. And I was so curious to how they were going to do it, because anytime I've seen stuff on the store, it was how it began in the strike and certain things, but you never got the perspective of what it was like from the people who really were there all the time and the different generations that built it. And they do that in this, and it's on Showtime. And the guy who did he's a super successful. He's an actor. He's a director. He also directed one of the most underrated movies that I don't think not enough people talk about, and Reign Over Me, which I also want to talk to him about. But he's a Comedy Store guy. He's a Comedy Store regular. He's a comedian, and I'm excited to have him on the show here today, ladies and gentlemen. Mike Binder. Mike, what's up, man?
Hey, thanks for having me on the show, Kristian.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you, dude, because I mean, just so much about this show that when I was watching it, from the tons of stuff that I didn't know, and I'll jump right into it. I didn't know about the fact that Freddie Prinze went to John Travolta's house and shot arrows into the fucking door.
Well, I didn't know that either. Jimmy Walker told me that story, and I was like, wow.
Yeah.
And then we got into that, and it was a true story, and we said, okay, we're gonna dig into that. I mean, there's some great stories. There were some stories that we heard that I just couldn't even put in the documentary. The great thing about the Comedy Store is every era is crazy.
Yep.
Even the sane, quiet eras are crazy. That place is just nuts.
Yep. There's just so much of everything about it. I related to so much of it, where the story for me was when I got out here in '99, I walked up to the Comedy Store, and at that time, as you document in the film, that it was pretty much like just like a no man land. There wasn't these lines that are out there now, and I walked into the original room at, I don't know, noon. Doors were open. No one's in there. I mean, anybody could have robbed it. And I walked in, and I walked up on the stage, and I just stood there, and I looked around the room, and I said, I'm going to play here. Carlin's been here. Pryor's been here. All these legends that have been here. I'm going to play here. And that was the place that you wanted to be. And there were so many stories like that in the documentary. But what was it about the store that made you you wanted that to be your place?
Well, I started there. I came from Detroit when I was 18 years old. I left home right after high school and drove out there, and I told my parents I got a job there, even though I didn't talk to anybody. I read about it in a book called The Last Laugh, and I told them I would go to community college once I got settled. And I got there, and it was closed. I went on Sunset Boulevard, and it was closed. And this old guy who actually he was an old comedian named Leonard Barr, who was in The Sting. He was Dean Martin's uncle. He was walking by, and I recognized it. I just said, "Oh, that guy was in The Sting," which was really weird for me, being from Detroit. Anybody in a movie, you know? Mm-hmm. I went, "Hey, I know you. Hey, what's up?" He goes, I go, "What happened to the Comedy Store?" He says, "It closed." I went, "Really? Where do young comedians go?" He went, "They go home." And he just kept walking. And I was 18, and I'd driven all the way across the country. I was just so bummed. And I got like a $7 a night hotel at Western, in Santa Monica and just try to. And then I thought, I'm going to look in the phone book, and I saw Westwood Comedy Store. And I didn't even know what made me do that. And I looked up on a Wednesday, and I called, and the place was, I could hear an audience in the background. And the woman said, I go, do you have an amateur night? She said, yeah, Monday. And she just hung up. And so I went there on Monday, and I had a little jacket and a tie and a suit. And I didn't even know. I never wore a jacket and a tie, a suit in my act, but I just that night I signed up, and I was running late, and I jumped over this fence from a place I found to park, and I ripped my from the knee all the way down the front of the suit, and I said, "Hell, I'm going on anyway," because I got put on the lineup back then. You know, there were enough acts that you could get on. Everyone signed up, and you know the stars were lined up because I got on and I killed.
Yeah,
and I really had never killed like that before. I'd been on stage, you know, but I had never had sets like that, you know.
Yeah.
And Mitzi just liked me. Argus Hamilton came and found me. He said, "Hey, Mitzi, the owner would like to talk to you." You know, okay, great. And she just pulled me into the system. I was getting spots that week.
Wow. Well,
so I didn't really know. It wasn't. I knew what it was, but it wasn't the Mecca yet. It wasn't a giant thing yet.
Right.
If you know what I mean.
Well, yeah, because so that was the question I had for with Mitzi, because but the Sunset Club was still open though at that point.
No, it was closed. Yeah. It had been open, and it was in a little room with a small version of the original room that she just rented in that giant building.
Okay.
It was just it was a giant building, which was a discotheque. It had been Ciro's, and now it was Art LeBeau's. It was a Mexican discotheque, and she rented the front of it. Her husband Sammy and then she got it in the divorce, and then Art LeBeau kicked her out. It was doing well enough that he said, "I'll do it myself," and he called it the Funny Farm.
Oh shit!
And then he threw her out and said, "I could do it myself without her." And she went to Westwood. That's when I got there, and it was a happening club in Westwood because UCLA was, you know, all the college students came, and Letterman and Leno and Jimmy Walker was the big star, and Gallagher would come in, and you know, Elaine Boozler was there, and then after I was there maybe for about 5 or 6 months, she made a deal to buy the whole building.
Wow.
But first she just went in and took the front part back, renamed it the Comedy Store, and the big part sat empty for about a year.
Okay. Well, so yeah, because I was wondering that big shift. Because I obviously always knew from being in the back, we talk Ciro's, we talk about all the time, and just listening to Joey Diaz, motherfuckers get shot right over in that area over there, and you'd hear about all that stuff. But knowing the Westwood stuff, I wish we still had the Westwood store because I don't live too far away. So
it was a great club, boy. Yeah. It rocked.
Yeah,
it just the walls bounced.
Was it like the same energy? Because the energy in La Jolla was they always said that the La Jolla store was always more like the energy was different than because the OR, very similar to what, I mean, and you guys talk about it in the documentary, to me is the best comedy room that you can play because it is the toughest one. It's like fighting in the octagon. You know, you have to go up at, I remember going up at Rogan had just gone up and he had done like 45 minutes and it was late at night. And I remember just saying to myself, that's how you test yourself. That's how you try. If there's 15 people, because hearing a lot of stuff, I just watched the 4th episode and I was there before the big boom of when I was at the last time. It's funny though. I did a set in the OR the night before all the Mencia shit went down. And and the next night I had a set. I called Tommy and I told him, I can't remember why, I had to do something else and I couldn't go and I missed all that. So that 2008 was really when I stopped going. But then the big boom happened. But I remember just like, this exactly what everybody was like Rick Ingram and those guys were talking about was that you would go and sometimes there wouldn't be anybody in the club and you couldn't start until like 10 o'clock until there were at least like, 10 or 15 people in there.
See, I can never imagine that because the years that I was there, the place was always packed. Always
jammed, right? And then because you came up with like Letterman and dude, by the way, that Letterman stuff you guys taught those interviews to be a fly in the wall for the unedited version.
Oh man, there's some more stuff in 5 that I put in. I mean, Letterman's a rare bird, and he always was. And you got to remember that I was this 18-year-old and they were all 10, 12 years older than me. And they just, I could get under their skin real easy,
Yeah. Well, but you came up. So was it pretty easy? Because that's the thing. I think one of the reasons that with the Comedy Store documentary that I've wanted to see someone do something like this for a long time, but I think that access to a lot of people you would assume might be tough. Like when you get guys like Jim Carrey and Michael Keaton, like to get Michael Keaton was awesome because a lot of people, I'm so glad that you shine that light on Michael Keaton because all you heard when you're a Comedy Store regular was how funny of a stand-up comedian Michael Keaton was, but he just never pursued it after he knocked it big in acting. So how were you able just because being friends with all these guys, you call them up and say,
yeah, I just called them. But that was it. I mean, you know how it is when you start with guys, I don't know. I just started. I mean, Leno was one of my best friends, and Letterman, I used to play racquetball with him, he wasn't one of my best friends, but I just always knew him, and to the point where when I would do the Letterman show, I would just go start walking over to his dressing room and the guy would go, "Where you going, sir?" I go, "I'm just going to tell Dave something." Oh, no. It's just like,
right. It's your buddy.
I would forget sometimes, and you just forget but also with Keaton, he lived in my neighborhood and I would talk to him, but he didn't want to do it. And I would say, hey, I would say, look, you're going to want to do this. You're going to want to do this because, like when I make a movie, I send an actor a script. And if it doesn't jazz them up, I never talk an actor into doing one of my movies, right. Ever. It's like, unless they're like in love with it, I don't want them around because they're just going to be too hard to work with. It's going to be like dragging a mule through the water, and you just don't want that. But with this one, I knew these guys well enough to go, you're going to want to, this is the store. This is our place. And, so I just was like, with Michael, I was like, you're going to want it. You're going to be so happy you did this.
Yeah.
And cause he's just like, it was so many years ago. He's like, what am I, and so I kind of had to bug him a little bit and be a little pesty.
Yeah.
And I didn't mind. I mean, I had to really drive Chris Rock crazy too, but that's just cause he's so busy and he doesn't do more than one thing at a time. And he just couldn't focus because He understands. Rock understands, but Mike just was just like, I just don't know what I would do. And he got there and he instantly was just on fire with memories. And he was so glad he was there. We walked around. And the same with Jim Carrey. Jim Carrey was jumping up on stage and walking around and telling me stories. I mean, they had these guys. There was just stuff I could have done 10 episodes with these guys.
I wish you would have.
I could have. I mean, I really could have. But it was supposed to be 4. I wanted to do 6, and then they said, "Okay, do 5."
Yeah, the compromise, I guess. But I'm telling you, man. And this again, it's not only it definitely has to do because it feels like watching home when I'm watching it, but it's so fascinating with everything of the way of the history of that place and how the point is made. You cannot go to any club in America and get that kind of lineup. You just can't do it for the amount of money that you're paying. You'd be paying hundreds upon thousands of dollars to pay for the lineup. You got guys like Sebastian that are going in there now. You know, these massive Whitney Cummings, these headliners that are going in there, and they're on the same lineup together. You know, it's just such a magical place. It really is still. And what do you think?
Oh, still. I mean, Rogan.
Yep.
Whitney, you know, Leslie Jones, you know, I mean, it's just one after another, you know, and Santino. I mean, Andrew Santino, to me, you could just watch that guy and you just don't know what he's gonna do, because I've seen the guy walk out with a whole new 15-minute opening act.
Yeah,
you know, which. In the middle of the lineup, which is so ballsy to do. Joey Diaz, Bill Burr,
yep.
Christina P.
Yeah,
you know, I mean, these
Bert Kreischer in there too, and
Bert Kreischer,
yep.
yeah. I mean, he's amazing. Bert Kreischer was so funny, man. I put this in the 5th episode. I do this intense interview with Bert. And then I realized I didn't even like make a dent in his consciousness. About 2 weeks later, he's on Rogan, and they're talking about some documentary in life. And he goes, you know, Joe, you know what I would love to see is a documentary on the store. And Ari goes, he's there with Ari Shafir, and he goes, they're doing one. Mike Binder's been doing it for like 2 years. And Bert goes, oh yeah, I'm in that. I actually am in that. I realized I didn't even fucking make a dent in that guy's consciousness. You know,
it sounds all right. I went to college with Bert.
Oh, really?
He's awesome. He's awesome, and like he's definitely, he's always been like that. And he and I was on his show a little while ago because I am by no means a saint, but when the first time Bert ever did stand up, I was there. It was this place called Potbelly's. And the reason I told him this bit of advice that apparently stuck with him was because one of the first times I ever went up on stage, I decided to drink maybe more than I should have. And it was this little stage, and I fell off of it. Not like to where I fell off to where I was like, you know, Bradley Cooper in Star is Born, but like, you know, but just enough to where it was noticeable. This guy's shit house. So I stopped doing it, and I told Bert. I remember that pop. I was like, dude, you know, I'd be on it, but I said, put the beer down for now because you're gonna rely on it. And he said for some reason that always stuck with him, and he and I have, you know, been able to continue to talk and have that and watch these guys succeed and see how the store and getting passed by Mitzi, what it meant to them. And Santino's another guy that I saw Santino start at this place, Room 5 that we used to.
Did you go to college in Miami?
Florida State.
Yeah,
Florida State. So
and where are you from originally?
New York in Queens. So like, so my journey was like to a lot of people, like that's why, like, so Steve Byrne just did his movie just came out, the opening act, and I thought it was a movie to me that, like, because again, as you heard in the intro, your series and Steve Byrne's movie right now, I cannot thank you enough, and I cannot tell you how much of an impact it had on my life right now for whatever thing I'm going through right now. I needed it, and I needed to see it, and I needed to be inspired, and you guys both inspired me tremendously. And watching Steve's stuff about in this movie, I used to watch stand up with my dad all the time in these specials, and you talk about some of these specials inside of it, and you mentioned Kinison, like watching Kinison for the first time and seeing what he did. Like, so at the time Kinison was at the store, had you pulled back from going to the store?
No. I was, when Kinison and Carl got there, I was there in the middle of it all. And I knew him very, very well. I knew both of them very well. And I was a doorman, and then I was a comedian. I was getting a lot of work, and I knew them both from the very beginning. I was there. And then right as he started to take off, I was gone because I was off doing movies, you know, so I wasn't around as much. But when he started to want and clean up, you know, I'm 36 years sober
Awesome.
in AA, and he would contact me and want to go to AA meetings and stuff.
Yeah.
But I knew them at the very beginning, and I understood the Carl relationship really well, and that's what I tried in every episode to tell certain stories,
Mm-hmm.
like the Freddie Prinze Alan Bursky relationship, and I really wanted to tell the Carl relationship because I think Carl's a very special guy, and I think that I always thought he was the funniest of the two in certain areas, and I would see nights Carl would just bring the house down, and he was also so protective of Sam. I can remember Argus and I were doormen at the Westwood store, and they lived way out in Hollywood, and they would walk there and back every day. And Carl was always in great shape, and Sam was the farthest thing from that. But he would make Sam walk there and back just to
take care of him.
Yeah.
I mean that I'll tell you, man. Like I always knew about the car accident and everything because I was a really big. But my guys were Carlin, Sam Kinison, Bill Hicks, and Williams. Those are the guys that really inspired me kind of growing up, and I always knew about that, but I never knew that story that he told about Sam. I don't want to take it away from people who haven't watched it, but with the actual passing and what happened there. So did you know that particular story in depth? Because it was chilling. I mean, it was a really chilling story about how it all went down.
Yeah, I did, and I wanted Carl to tell it, but I also had to make Carl the promise that it wouldn't just be Carl talking about Sam.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? That I would tell a wider story. Because rightfully, he didn't want to just be the guy talking about Sam. He wanted to tell the full story.
Yeah.
And he trusted me because a lot of people wanted him to tell that story. But he trusted me,
Yeah.
and he's a good man.
Well, you can tell that the movie's made by a comedian and someone who's, I mean, for as much as you're telling the story and it's honest and there's a lot of things going on, you're also you're protecting your friends as you should, and you're protecting the store as you should. When it came about, though, well, first of all, the question is, how did it come about? Because as we goof around about how Bert's saying, somebody do a thing about the store, like at what point? Because I also know when I was there, the store was very protective about what was shot inside there, what can be shot, what they're going to allow people to do. How did you get the approval for it? How did you come up with the idea to decide to do it? And was it an easy process? Did they say, yeah, let's just do it? Because Adam's
it wasn't my idea.
It wasn't. Okay.
No, I had been gone from the store for many years.
Yeah.
It was an incoming call. I had never made a documentary, and I had been, away from the store for a long time. And I was Mike Tolan, who did the Last Dance, the Michael Jordan thing,
yeah,
had come to Peter Shore, the owner of the Comedy Store, about doing a documentary. And Peter said, I think you should call Mike Binder. And I was just driving down the road coming back. I was swimming at a buddy's house in Malibu and out in the ocean, and got a call. I went, I wonder what Mike's calling about. And I rarely do anything that isn't my idea or one of my projects. And I just went, yeah, I'll do that.
Wow.
And I'd been there once in like 18 years. I went in with Bill Burr, who had played a part in one of my films, and I went in to see him, and the place was packed, and it was nice to see that it was all on fire again. But it was a little odd for me to be back there all these years later. And then I was on Maron's podcast, and we talked about it a lot. But that wasn't my idea to do a Comedy Store documentary. But they had done that book about our era,
mm-hmm.
And then Dying Up Here. And then I was doing Ray Donovan at the time. I didn't want to really be involved in that book because I didn't want to do like fake versions of Mitzi and all that.
Yeah.
But this I did, and I just felt this is the way to tell the story as a real documentary and do it real and with the real people and real clips. And I like instantly knew it could be good if I didn't have any time frame on it.
Yeah.
That was the thing, I was like, it has to be like done when it's done.
Yeah. Well, you said you were working on it for 2 years?
2.5 years.
2.5 years. Shit. So correct me if I'm wrong. I thought because you said, I mean, I know you said that you had been there with Burr, but were you there for Mitzi's?
Yeah.
Okay, you were.
Yeah.
Because that's why I said when it came in,
This was after
okay.
I had already decided to do this, and Mitzi had passed about 6 months later.
Okay, because
so I filmed the memorial that night. No one knew that. I did it with kind of really quietly.
I see, and it's because that's where I thought I saw you.
I went on stage that night. That was the only time I've done stand up in 20 some years.
That's why I thought in the main room. You were in the main room, yeah, because I think your class was kind of doing a lot of the main room stuff. Because I know Jim had popped in for a little bit, and he was in the back corner for a while too. And then I know that a lot, so the thing that I took away from that, and this is why, it's for anybody who's wondering how authentic of a Comedy Store documentary this is. At the end of the 4th episode, you guys profile Brian Holtzman, who is the best, and he is a comedian's comedian. I mean, so at the end of the night, I was there. It was myself, Renazizi, Steve Simone, Ari Shafir, and Mark Ellis, and we're sitting in the front. And here we are, obviously a lot of stories and stuff, talking about Mitzi and everything. And here's Holtzman. And Mike, I'm in tears. This guy, he kills me. Did you know a lot about Holtzman before the doc?
I didn't.
Okay.
I didn't, but I think he exemplifies the Comedy Store to me.
100%.
He exemplifies the Comedy Store to me, and he exemplifies the late night energy of the Comedy Store to me. And I think he's brilliant. And Burr and I, we want to produce a special for him, and I just love the guy, and I filmed him, I would say 20 times, his set late at night. And but I told him to ask him if he would wear the same shirt, the same clothes.
Yeah.
And I didn't know what I was going to do with him. And then, it was so funny because someone said, watching the doc it's like watching Game of Thrones. Every episode, one of your favorite characters dies, right. And I really didn't want to do that in episode 4. So, and I thought, what I want to do in episode 4 is just, I want to let Holtzman go. I want to wind him up and go. And so we set up all these old clips of late night with Robin and Jim Carrey and even Bruce Baum, and I think Sam does some stuff late night, but just kind of showed how crazy it was late night.
Yeah.
And then just started asking modern comics, who's late night now? And they just kept going, Holtzman.
Yep. And
then I just started talking to Brian, and then I let him do I think it's a 12-minute set or something,
Phenomenal. It's that because my 2 late night guys that I would watch religiously were Holtzman and Don Barris. Like those. Yeah. Those are
he's in episode 5.
Great because Don because I was there. I mean, I would stay. I did something very rare for the Comedy Store, and we talk. Rick Ingram and I talk about this all the time. I became a regular, and then I became a doorman. And the reason I did that was because at the time I would kind of milk spots. They would give me employee spots, and then they would give me regular spots, and I would get stuff in the belly room on shows, and I would get as many spots as possible. But I was the worst doorman in the world. I mean, I was terrible. I was terrible. Like I remember getting stoned with Ingram in the parking lot, and then at one point, because Ingram was like, because you had like kind of and this is again in the era of 2003, 2004, and the guy Dean, who was the manager at the time, like, where's Harloff? And then Ingram goes, there he goes, and I just drive home. And in the middle of and like it was it was one of these things. I remember, I think I said I was afraid of heights because I didn't want to change the awning, but all this different shit. But it was just, that was the kind of craziness. You couldn't get away with that shit now from the way that they run the club. But yeah,
right here.
Yeah, either way, because that, and the other thing that I wanted to talk about was, you mentioned, you're talking about Mark Maron and what he was able to do and go from watching him be a guy who talks about it, how he was struggling, he was going through this divorce, and then he starts the podcast, what Rogan's done with the podcast, and how new media has kind of changed it. And I love the fact that you made the kind of correlation between what Carson used to do for like your generation when you guys were coming up to what Rogan now does for comics. So were you pretty, is this a lot of stuff that you were aware of, or like more stuff that you started to learn as you were doing your research for the doc?
It's all stuff I started to learn. I knew everything from till 99.
Okay.
2009. I knew everything. I didn't have to learn anything. But from then on, I was the reporter trying to get information,
Yeah.
And it was all new. And I mean, I really didn't understand the Carlos Mencia thing. I'd heard about it, and I really didn't understand. I mean, that was what I loved the best, figuring it all out and seeing new talent and new people. And at one point, Joe Rogan and I just didn't really get along. I mean, he didn't like me.
During the doc or for before?
Before I started shooting this thing, look, the thing is, the newer comics, they don't know a lot about the older comics, and the older comics don't know a lot about the new one. Leno and Letterman and Keaton and all that. They don't really know about anyone other than Chris Rock and Chappelle, basically.
Yeah.
They don't. They now this last few weeks know Burr, and I mean I had Burr and Letterman. Burr's a really good friend of mine. I mean, he was in my movie. I directed his special. We've become really good friends, and I had Letterman and Burr up on the roof together for this piece I did, and. I was telling Letterman, we were in the original doing an interview, and then Burr came for the afternoon. I was telling him about him and how great he was doing in his podcast, and he goes, "I never heard of him." And his assistant said, "He was on your show like 8 times, Dave." But the truth is, I didn't know about Burr. I found out about Burr from a guy, my buddy, that was building my house. He told me about this guy on YouTube. I mean, when you get away, you get away. And, I didn't know about Sebastian. I didn't know about I knew about Rogan because he ate fish or something on some show. Or I really didn't know about Rogan. I didn't know about Joey D. Rogan told me about Joey Diaz. And they didn't know, none of them knew about me, really. I think they knew maybe I had some show on HBO or something, They knew about Letterman and Leno and Gallagher. I don't know what they knew of. Comedians, they know this. They know themselves, and the only kind of the in-betweens were maybe Saget and Rock and Chappelle, right? That's and it was surprising. I would talk to Leno and I'd say, these guys are doing with their podcasts and their Netflix specials, they're on fire. And they're not selling any tickets though. They're not. I go, yeah, no, they're selling out the Forum. They're selling arenas. No, they're not. I go, yeah, Jay, they are.
Yeah.
It
is funny. generation. I mean, even like I grew up a Howard Stern guy, and I remember from the second he was just so against podcasting, and I understand from that perspective. It's like when you're coming up, and that's how traditional radio, and you're building it out that particular way that anybody decides that they want to start doing. He had to earn for what he was doing and get his spots and doing radio, so that anybody can turn this on and do that. There's a pushback to it, and I'm sure it's the same thing with like when you talk about Leno and Letterman and what they had to do
Right.
to build up. Yeah.
So I get there, and Adam Egan introduced me to Rogan. Oh, great, you're doing a documentary. Great, yeah. You can't film my act because I'm doing a Netflix special. I said, no problem. He goes, but I'll do an interview. I'm just really busy. And he goes, check out Joey Diaz. He's really nice to me. And then a couple times I asked him after his Netflix special if I could film him, and he gets all mad at me for asking. And I'm thinking, I got an attitude. I'm like, hey man, don't you know who the fuck I am? And then, when originally I had I was one of the original guys with the neons on the wall, and Mitzi got mad at me because I did an HBO special. I let George Carlin produce it, not her, and he was like my childhood hero, so she took it down and took my name off the wall. We got in a fight years ago. We worked it out, but Peter, her son, when I came back to do this thing, got my neon out and put it back up on the wall. And I guess it bent Joe out of shape. Like, who the fuck is this guy having a neon?
Yeah.
That's what I heard. He was whining about it to everybody, and he just got madder. And so I was like, fine, I'll do the fucking documentary. I won't mention him. I'll do it without him. I don't care. And then I get into it. So I don't talk to him or mention anything I don't ask him for anything for about a year. And then I go, as I start to, look at this thing as like an investigator, I go, fuck, I can't tell this story without Joe Rogan.
Yeah.
I can't tell it. He is the comedy story in a lot of ways, It's like I can't tell it without Pryor. And I don't know what I'm going to do. And Peter Shore talks to him, and Adam talks to him, and he's like, I don't dig the guy, and then all this other shit. These other people now are lining up. It becomes like it always was, kind of like high school, where these people are like going out of their way to make sure that they let Joe know how much they're not happy about this guy they're doing it, from the old days. So, and I just stayed away. But one night he calls me, he texts me out of nowhere, hey man, we should get together, and it ended up working out really good,
Yeah,
but
it seemed like you guys vibe pretty well from the.
Oh yeah, no, yeah. Once that, but it was like a little bit of who the fuck is this guy, and I was like, doesn't this fucking guy? What's this guy making such a big deal about everything for? And that's a typical Comedy Store kind of thing.
It's like two bulls just hitting each other in the head.
Well, I'm not a bull. He's a bull. I never got as big as him. It's just, but I'm just saying, it's just the different generations at that place, or it's just, there's always personalities clashing. But the fact is, I love Rogan, and I think Rogan would say the same thing. I think he ended up really coming through for me on a couple things, and
awesome.
and I think that's the way it's always been at the Comedy Store. I remember Dreesen and I got in a beef years ago, and now Dreesen and I are really great friends, and it's just, that's just the way it is,
the drama. It's part of it, because it's also it plays into, it's funny because that plays into what the store is, and all those different things, and all those. I remember watching, and I was curious if it was gonna be any of that. I'm sure you heard tons of stories about Ari and Bobby Lee, like, and stuff that.
Oh yeah. I mean, and by the way, they both told me these stories about each other, but I didn't want to put them in because I couldn't figure out a way to put them in friendly and without making people think these two guys just hate each other,
Right.
and they don't.
It
They
was like
don't hate.
it was like a
They
rest.
don't hate at a restaurant in
Yeah,
the valley. They already beat the hell out of them,
yeah,
and
that's true too. But it was like an old, reminded me of like an old school like 1987 like WWF rivalry between the two of them.
yeah, but that's just the Comedy Store, I mean, and that's just it, I mean, I just, and like even Leno and Letterman, they had this horrible public press fight for 20 years. You know, I got back there and they both were saying the sweetest things about each other. And I know them both off camera, and they, you know, I don't think they'll ever really be like tight friends again because they're just such old guys and they live off. So, but they really they have nothing but warm feelings towards each other,
Yeah, especially with all the stuff that how public that was. That's good to hear too, because like you said, you get to a point, and they're so successful in all the stuff that they've done. I love when you asked Letterman if he do a podcast. I don't know where to find a podcast. I don't know what I would do with a podcast. It was such. It absolutely, yeah.
He was so true. I mean, I took this piece out just for time, but he was talking about how when he stopped doing his show, he had to make a phone call, and he realized he hadn't made a phone call in 30 years.
Jeez.
He was like, I just because someone always was dialing calls for him.
Right. Yeah, well, I mean, just catching up with all just a couple of things I wanted to ask you though, Mike, because first is this, because having Harris Pete, by the way, in there was another absolute, like that is a staple of the Comedy Store. But I always remember him saying, and then I was talking to Ellis about this, that Jim Varney was one of the funniest guys.
Oh, he was amazing. Yeah, there were a couple guys that I really feel bad I didn't get in there, and Bill Hicks too. That was another guy. But Jim Varney was before Vern. He was just a great stand-up comic, but a lot of it was just Southern comedy. But he was a great guy, and he was a really warm guy too, really friendly, just a great back in the hall guy.
Yeah. Because Harris used to talk about how funny he was for sure. So, and the other thing is this. So I noticed when you were when you going back to the Rogan Mencia stuff, when all that went down. So the one thing that I thought I was glad to see was that you talk about Adam and how he kind of turned the club around. When I was there, the guy who ran the place was Tommy. And I know that for like a split second, and I don't know if it's in episode 5, but you show Tommy for like a split second on his picture. And if for those people who don't know who the hell Tommy is, he is a guy kind of talk like this guy, and Mitzi likes you. She wants you to come back. And so Tommy, and he looked like the kind of 99-cent version of Tom Petty. And so when is there more on Tommy at all? Because those years and the stuff that was going down at that club, I thought was pretty fascinating.
I didn't do a lot on Tommy because, it was just, there's only so much shelf space.
Yeah.
And to be honest, not a lot of people said good stuff about him. And I wasn't looking for negative. I was looking for positive,
Yeah, fair enough.
And if I had more time, I would have tracked him down. But as it is, I mean, this thing was so much work. And, there was another guy, Franklin Ajay. I so wanted to bring him in from Australia. He was a guy he was one of my favorite comedians, and he was such a sweetheart of a guy, but he lives in, I didn't want anybody that wasn't at the store.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I didn't want to do anyone in Zoom. I didn't want to do, I didn't want to.
Yeah.
Everyone had to be at the store. And, but there were a few guys, and Tommy, I don't think I think he lives in Mexico or something, or
I haven't heard of,
and I wasn't going to track him down. I had so many other lists of people. I mean, Richie Belzer, I tried so hard to get him here, but he's in France, and he wanted, I think he would have been happy if I could have done a camera for him there,
Yeah. Well, so with the fifth episode coming in, like what I don't really want you to spoil it for me because I want, but if
You're gonna love it.
I can't wait. It's, for everybody out there. Once again, it's on Showtime. It's the Comedy Store documentary. Director Mike Binder here, who Comedy Store regular, and you guys really should check this out. I know so many people ask me on the SEN Live when we're going over old comedy stories, and it's always the Comedy Store that Mark Ellis and I always talk about. This is the documentary that you need to watch, and you need to check it out. There's so many fascinating stories, and the information that Mike was able to get out of it is just incredible. But before you go, Mike, because I know only have you for a little bit here. I do want to talk to you about. There's so many things that you've done besides obviously just you work as a comedian. You're a very successful writer and director. And one of the movies that you did that I just watched this scene again the other day because I've seen it so many times and it moves me to tears every single time is Rain Over Me. It's a phenomenal film. It's a really great movie with I think that you bring some of the best acting out of Adam Sandler, and his dramatic work is fantastic.
Yeah, he's amazing, isn't he?
Fantastic. And there's a scene at the end of the film where this poor guy is going through this traumatic event his entire life, for the entire movie. And at the end, he sees his in-laws, and it's just this subtle kiss that he gives his mother-in-law. And so just to total one of these brief, my brother passed away about 2 years ago. And he always reminds me of that particular scene in that moment. And every time I see it, it's just I have to ask you about that scene when you directed that particular scene. What that subtle kiss, was that just something was it written in the script, or did it come up?
No, Adam just did it.
Okay, just did it.
Adam just did it in one take.
Wow.
He might have even done it in the first rehearsal, and he just blew everybody away. And he kept doing it, and it just was so real and so surprising. It was just something that came to him to do.
Yeah.
And it was wonderful. And it's just, he's really, Uncut Gems is, I've seen that, I think 7 times already. I mean, I think he's a better dramatic actor than he's even a comedian, but
yeah, I know.
But I call him the boss, because I mean, the guy goes out and fills arenas as a comedian, and he sings and dances, and I mean, there's nothing he can't do, you know. But as a dramatic, and there's a scene in that thing where him and Cheadle are waiting in Liv Tyler's waiting room, and he just breaks down the whole story of what happened to his family. He's never told anybody, and he just rolled it off. And I would be out there at the monitors just crying,
Yeah. Well, is that one of those things, like, to bring back something you said earlier, that when you wrote that movie and you sent it to Adam, like that like you said, you want someone to just respond to it right away and get it. And clearly it seems like
totally.
Yeah.
Well, I was doing that movie with Tom Cruise and Javier Bardem.
That's initially who was.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
And then Tom Cruise, I wrote that for Tom Cruise, and he didn't want to do it. Then Bardem was doing it, and Bardem was in my office, and we were trying to figure out who to go to. And and I was saying, well, maybe we should go to Brad Pitt. And this was the time when you'd have shelves full of DVDs.
Yep.
And Bardem, just this great guy, he just goes over and he pulls out Punch Drunk Love, and he goes, "Who is this actor? This actor, I love this actor." I go, well, that's a friend of mine, actually. He's a comedian. No, he's not a comedian. He's an actor. What? Adam Sandler. This is the guy we should get. I said, all right. I said, really? That's a great idea. Anyway. That's a great. I said, all right, I'll send it to him. And so I got it to him, and then I heard he doesn't want to do it. I said, okay. And so we're having other people read it, and I'm walking around New York about a month later, and he just calls me and goes, "Hey, Binder, I read it. I want to do that thing. Jackie read it, and Jackie, that's a home run. That's a 10. It's a 10, Binder. I want to do it. Let's do it." You know,
Yeah.
I go, oh, you know, what change your mind? He goes, I was afraid of it at first, but I want to do it. Let's do it. Let's do it. And then he just never changed his mind.
Yeah, I would tell people to make sure, if you haven't checked that movie out, you should. It's great performances by Sandler, obviously, John Cheadle, Liv Tyler. You should absolutely check that film out. I know he's only got you for a couple minutes because there's so many great things. Indian Summer was a movie I used to watch all the time. I used to watch Indian Summer. I mean, that was like one of your first movies, right? The directed
second, yeah. Movie, yeah.
I remember that. I remember watching that movie on cable when I must have been in high school, right? And
that was the camp I went to.
Was it really?
That was my summer camp, and that guy, it was with Sam Raimi.
Yeah,
Sam Raimi was in my cabin, and my buddy, and he went there, and
I wish I had you for like 3 hours. I could talk to you so much to talk about.
Well, I'll come back another time.
I would love to have you back. So yeah. Let's do that. Let's try to get you back in, because I want to go over. I want to talk to you about your career in general, because you've had such a great career, so many cool things, so many. I mean, and the other thing, thank you very much in the episode for keeping there about you're super honest about when there's a conversation you have with Pauly Shore. And he brings up at one point about, and you'd mentioned it earlier about you had a struggle with alcohol, and you brought it up and you were honest about it. And it's this conversation, and it was, I think that it certainly, and again, bringing up my brother who had a problem, it meant a lot to me. I think it meant a lot of people out there, especially that you were able to do that too. So thank you for that. And
well, thank you. I have 36 years.
It's amazing.
Free of alcohol, or not recovered. I'm recovering, I mean, but I take it really serious. So thanks for saying that.
Of course.
I go to AA, but you're not supposed to say that on a public level, but I do, because I think people need to know that's the best way out.
Well, it was inspiring, and I thank you. And again, I can't thank you enough for this documentary and what you brought to it, because it really is. And the time that I'm in my life right now, it meant a lot to me. It brought up a lot of good memories, and it's a very inspiring documentary. So, thank you very much, Mike Binder, ladies and gentlemen. You can find the show. It's on Showtime, and I watch it on demand. So, is there a time that it drops on Showtime normally?
Well, they're all going to be after. Well, it drops the day that it airs, but then after next Sunday, all 5 will be on. Yeah,
I meant as far as time. I wasn't sure what time on Sunday night, if it's like 5 or 6, whatever it does. I know
10 o'clock at Sunday night. But on Sunday, the shows are all there. They put it up on Sunday afternoon.
So, guys, go and check that out, please. It is the Comedy Store documentary. Mike Binder, ladies and gentlemen. Mike,
good luck on your return to stand-up.
Thank you very much. I appreciate it. I look forward to seeing you at the club. Maybe one of these days.
Absolutely.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, Mike Binder. And thank you guys for joining us here on 101. Thanks, Mike. And we will see you guys next week. What an amazing, amazing run we've had thus far. Please go check out the Comedy Store. And we've got a lot of great guests coming up. So Ryan Satin coming up next week, ladies and gentlemen. And talk to him about what the hell's going on with his life. So, all right, everybody. Peace out, Mother F's.